So, uh, very good morning. Uh, so we started this. This is the first of its kind course that we've started in AIOC on, and I'm thankful to the committee for picking up this course on environmental consciousness in ophthalmology, and our role as doctors and what we are doing, and maybe what we can do in the next few years to get ourselves to get better and help the society and the system at large. Can I have the slides on, please? Slides. Yeah. So today we have four of us. We are all of us come from different backgrounds. I am second generation into private practice. Dr. Soumya has started a practice. Sabita has been running a practice in Pune, and Dr. Haripriya needs no introduction because she is running one of the largest high volume centers, providing guidelines not only to India but to the rest of the world. So it's very important for us to understand from each institute's perspective and each person's perspective. And this is not, it's not like we are authorities in this. So I would value anyone with any points to even break up in the middle and, correct us or let us know something, because I think this has to be a joint sort of a activity where we all have to move together in one direction. So we are a lot of eye doctors in one place. So AIOC itself published this data, the All India Ophthalmic Society, that they have 23,000 registered ophthalmologists. And there's going to be 25,000, let's say in 2020, so I'm guessing it should be about 27, 28,000 as of now. So it's a huge number of eye doctors that are there. And the number of, so this is just India, but we look at the number of eye surgeries done globally, there are about 26 million cataract surgeries being done, which is a very big number, so I had to put zeros so that we can get a perspective of what's happening. And so we generate a lot of garbage. And sometimes, or most of the times, for most of us, this garbage goes out the bin and we don't know where it goes and what happens to all this. I'm just going to very briefly talk, because this is going to be handled in detail. When we come to plastic, which is probably one of the biggest waste we generate, we decided to measure how much plastic we generate. So we saw that for 5 patients, we generate about 800 grams of plastic if we use single-use disposables for all our patients. Then we used ChatGPT to run an algorithm to understand what's going on. And this is what the whole, the complex mathematics of what happens when all the eye doctors in the world operate 5 surgeries a day, 5 days a week on an average, because some centers operate high volume, some centers operate low. What really does happen to all that plastic, and how much plastic do we actually generate? So to show you in perspective, if you pile up the plastic in 1,000 square feet area, which is the size of your clinic, it's going to go from Mariana Trench to Mount Everest every year. And that's the amount of plastic that we generate as ophthalmologists only. So forget about the rest of the specialities, because only eye generates this much plastic. So for the benefit of the 2 doctors that have just walked in, the amount of plastic that we generate as eye doctors is here. If you look at it, Dr. Vandana, you can pile it up in a year. Every year this much plastic we generate. We calculated it at Raghudeep, and all this plastic lands up in landfill and lands up in oceans and God knows where and all. Again, not all plastics are the same, and there are various classifications based on their biodegradability and compatibility and whatnot. And this is just to show you a cassette from one of the popular companies, Alcon. It says 6, we think it says recycled, but none of this plastic is recyclable. None of our packaging of our cassettes, cartridges, anything is recyclable, so it all goes into fill. And obviously we know where it goes on from there and where it goes. This is just to show you very dramatic picture that we saw on the internet, all of us must have seen. When it comes to air pollution, apart from doing whatever we are doing in the clinical work, the biggest source of pollution in our system right now is electricity. Because when we looked at it and we saw to measure a carbon footprint, which is going to be my next talk, this is how India works. This is data from 2023. 76% of electricity in a country like India now is still thermal. We talk of nuclear and solar and we talk of hydroelectricity, but nuclear generates only 10%. It's still 75-76% of fossil fuel burning and coal burning that we are using in our hospitals, at homes, to run our country, which is pretty alarming, because the government doesn't show out this data. They show the 2% or the 5%, but they don't show this magnitude of the problem. So we not only consume electricity, but to keep these things cool, we also use fresh water. So we use fresh water. 80% of the water used for cooling these thermal power plants is fresh water that goes into waste, gets into steam and gets blown out. So that's the amount of wastage that we're doing when we're doing electricity. And I think Dr. Soumya will handle how to conserve. But this is the problem. The other problem that we do, I mean, this is the major bulk of our air pollution, but then we also use a lot of gases, ETO being one, which can cause cancers and whatnot. So a lot of these countries have banned the use of ETO for sterilization for instruments because it's very heavily carcinogenic, and because we don't have any set methodology and any strict regulations looking at how to dispose or discard these things. One more thing that is very important is paper. Again, not going to run you through the whole algorithm, but we looked at paper, 600 grams of paper per cataract surgery. If we use single-use disposables that use packaging that we're opening, gloves, whatnot, and if we compile it all together and lay down this thing, we are going to fill up this entire perimeter that encompasses the entire lot. I don't know if you can see this here, but this is the Biswa Bangla Convention Center, and it converts the entire block will cover up in a year. This is the amount of paper we consume as cataract specialists. Only cataract, I'm not talking any other surgery. So it's very important that we be very judicious of what we use when it comes to this. And we'll discuss this again, but right now it's very important for us to primarily, if at all, we as ophthalmologists, we can see there are 6 people in the hall today, but hopefully next year there should be 10 and then 15. And if we just understand the magnitude of the problem, then the solution is pretty straightforward. But to understand only will be the biggest challenge. We are polluting water by doing our laundry. We are doing a lot of washing and we are throwing this off. And apart from this, a lot of chemicals, a lot of these, I mean, this is not necessarily from ophthalmology, but a lot of infection also does get washed out because there is no stringent rules and regulations, particularly for small clinics and small hospitals for sewage and hospital wastewater management. Again, this is the same thing. So I think it's very important that we open our view into a very little broader perspective, starting now, because someone has to be a catalyst of change. And like we said, we are so many of us. This is how India stands right now from a global perspective. We are 112 in terms of our ranking for sustainable development out of 166. So we are right down there. We are nowhere up, and it's unlikely that we'll be up in the near future because of the problems there are. But it's also because although the government is making efforts, the level of commitment to the programs that have been started and the efforts that are being done are fairly low. They're not looking at a follow-up and they're not looking at a feedback loop. So they're just coming up with incentive strategy and they're giving up strategies on this thing, but they're not finishing the loop by making sure it's implemented on ground. So I think it's very important for us, to be as doctors, as ophthalmologists, to at some point, or as general human beings, to have a certain level of commitment to our environment and to our immediate environment. And I think with this course, we'll be able to come up with certain strategies that will help us in at least getting ourselves tuned to the idea of sustainability. Thank you. So now I invite Samita to talk on her presentation on waste management. You can just connect to mine. But I think, I knew it. So the thing is, last year when we attended the European Society, the ESCRS, they went so far ahead as to stop giving us kit bags, and they made the entire conference vegetarian because it's the meat that causes a lot of carbon footprint, and they kept the air conditioning down. Yeah, and they give us water bottles to refill. So, if if the whole world is looking at it with smaller numbers, we are such a huge community. If you look outside, so much of wastage will be done. So maybe it's a good time to start thinking.
And as the lowest amount of recycling that happens almost in the world, I think we really need to buck up. Today, thank you, Dr. Samaresh, for putting together this IC on sustainability. It's absolutely the need of the hour, and I'm glad that at least All India has given us this sweet little below ramp room to kind of start the conversation. So today I'm going to talk about waste management strategies, and we have Dr. Haripriya here who's going to talk about reusables, and every piece of literature that I looked at had Arvind as the kind of the place to kind of copy and the mentor of everyone, including the American Academy and European Academy. So I'll leave that part to ma'am, but I've been asked to talk about plastic and paper. So we'll just go ahead with that. So this is one of the photos that was published in the National Geographic. A photographer, Justin Hoffman, he won the Photographer of the Year. And one of the things that hit me when I looked at this photo, being a scuba diver, and all of us are very familiar with the piece of trash in this photo, which is the bud, because we as ophthalmologists do use it. It kind of hit home for a lot of people globally. So, why is this the need of the hour? Why do we need to look at where our plastic goes? So, yeah, microplastics have been found in every human placenta tested recently, and so the next generation is basically going to be plastic. All your children and grandchildren will be Barbies and Kens. So that's why we really need to take a look at this closer. So, healthcare in general globally is responsible for 4.4%, which means that if healthcare was a country, we would be the fifth largest contributors of global emissions. And 71% of this arises from manufacture, use, and disposal of medical supplies. So, we are all the culprits sitting in this room. Okay, so over 14,000 tons of waste is generated, and 20 to 25% of this is plastic. Approximately 35 to 45% of this is also paper. And almost 90% of this plastic ends up in landfills, and almost 70 to 90% of this waste is actually not biohazardous at all, so it should not be going for incineration. So the problem is that at source we are making some big mistakes, and we'll take a look at it. So how does one achieve environmentally sustainable healthcare? Energy saving, renewable energy, environmentally wise product purchasing, so reduce the purchasing and look at reusables. um, Looking at re-engineering a lot of our products, so we need to have some serious conversations with pharma and product manufacturers to make reusable products as well as recyclable products. And of course, like Dr. Samaresh said, food choices, composting food waste in larger institutes and hospitals, and choosing more plant-based options, and giving lesser and wiser choices with pharmaceuticals as well. So, although these numbers are post-COVID, so they are a bit higher than what was usually there in 2019 and early 2020. You can see that the waste that is being produced within our country is way beyond the amount of capacity that we even have to treat the waste. So actually most of the waste that's supposedly going into biomedical and management for incineration and being managed by the plants isn't actually even going there, because the treatment plants cannot handle that volume of waste. So where is it going? And you can answer that question when you do a drive between any two cities in India where there are rivers and tributaries. You just look there and you will see all that waste, and a lot of it is medical waste. So, one of the studies I looked at, so just to give you perspective, AIMS produces 25,000 kilos of waste a day. So if we think about the numbers, 90% of it doesn't need to be in that waste. It can be segregated, separated, and recycled. That would make a huge difference. So these are the UN numbers of the countries that mismanage their plastic waste. And as you can see, India is, as usual, the one of the top countries. India mismanages 85% of the plastic waste. So we really need to look at what we can do. So of course, the three rules of sustainability, the three R's is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And the first one being reduce, which I think ma'am will talk about, and also reuse, ma'am is going to talk about. But basically, Arvind, being one of the places that has such high volume, generates only 1/20th of the amount of emissions that any hospital in the United Kingdom does. So you can, and the end of the mitis rates are the same or less. So what are they doing? We are looking forward to that. And of course the bed sheet story, where they speak about using a bed sheet until it tears, then it becomes a pillow cover, then it becomes a rag, and until you can use it till its last day and it's usable in any form, it should be used. So what is recycling? Um, First of all, we segregate and dispose our medical plastics, which hopefully should go into a sterilization if it is really needed to. And then you sort and segregate it, and it goes into several different types of recycling, which I'll talk about. And then you have your end product or your recycled product. So when we look about plastics in medical applications, you'll see that most of the plastics are actually single types of plastics, but unfortunately, there are additives or coatings done on these plastics which make them unrecyclable. So we need to actually hold the producers and pharma responsible And even though India, the government has given kind of 2030 as the deadline and asked them to change these policies, not much is being done about it. There is talk about a magical monomer being developed that will have all the qualities to recycle without producing further pollution during that recycling. But so far, we have not seen much. Of course, bioplastics are a promising thing, but they don't match up to the regulations such as, fireproof, childproof, easy for elders to use. So that's also a thing. So recycling, when we look at plastic recycling, there are 4 types of recycling that can be looked at. One is basically like what we do for PET bottles. So it goes from PET to PET. Basically, the same compound is remade into the same compound. The secondary type of recycling is that basically mechanical processes are put in and this compound is turned into another kind of plastic product. So also as healthcare owners and hospital owners, we should be looking at these secondary compounds to use in our buildings because that completes your loop of sustainability. So some of these things are like panels or tiles. So a lot of these things are also very, very durable. So you should look at also using sustainable products. The tertiary recycling, which is something that I personally do in my clinic, although it's a small volume clinic, is we can collect all the plastic waste that we have and we generate, especially those that actually don't touch the patient. So apart from your drape and your syringe and your one tube, actually none of your other plastic touches your patient. So technically it's not a biohazard. So when you are doing your surgery or you're seeing your patient, you should be sorting at source. So when you sort at source, you'll realize that almost 90% of the plastic that you're sending to the biomedical waste actually can go in for recycling. So we have a separate recycling drum that we fill up, and there is an organization in Pune called Keshav Sita Trust that does the tertiary type of recycling, where they take any and all recyclable plastics and some with additives as well, and they break it into pellets and turn it into polyfuel. And there are many organizations who are doing this. I'll just take 2 minutes more, Samaresh. And of course, the 4th type of recycling is energy generation with incineration. But honestly, none of our biomedical units are doing this. So I've already discussed the challenges. Some things that will help us would be color coding of the plastics by the manufacturers, so we know what kind of plastic can go where. And these are the things that we can do. So I'll just run through them. Of course, we should share the burden. No offense to any of these companies. They make great products. But look at the packaging. It's like as if we are presenting a gold coin to someone at their wedding. Why does that bottle need 3 cases, 1 plastic tray, and then be put into the box? This is not even a government requirement. So we need to talk to these companies and we need to ask them why they're presenting them in this manner. And also all of those gifts that pharma gives, and I bet all of you have experienced this, they'll bring all these nonsense gifts that are of no use to us. Even our staff doesn't want to take that stuff. So basically what happens, it ends up into the bin. So definitely, like I already have told you, monomaterials should be used, water soluble glues should be used, minimize the use of pigments and use materials that can be separated and recycled. And we as societies and associations need to start driving this to pharma. So segregate, make people understand the value of recycling, tell the biomedical people or your organizations that you get in touch with that this is not biohazard, you can collect this from us, we are ensuring that this is not biohazardous, and reusing after sterilization wherever possible. Of course, whatever we are discussing today is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. People are doing entire degrees, jobs and PhDs on sustainability. And this is how I collect my waste and give it to an organization. We can swap out simple things, so that plastic bud that seahorse was holding, in my clinic all buds are now paper buds. You can also use bamboo buds. Keep the disposable sheets small. Reuse any outer packets. So the packet that comes for the BSS now goes to my phaco machine to hang to fill in the fluid. So that packet is used a bunch of times for different things before it gets discarded. And then replace cotton and tissues, because cotton is actually a very unsustainable product. Replace it with bamboo. Bamboo tissues are now the same price as wholesale cotton or normal tissues, and very biodegradable, very easy to grow, very sustainable. We reuse our bottles. So these are the OT patient bottles. We will put the date on it, and then we will use it as dilating drops in the OPD, so that we have that sterility for the OT patients, but at least you keep using these bottles for a month or so after, so that you don't throw these bottles in the OR. Find organizations, these are organizations that use chips packets and non-recyclable products, packets into beautiful products like bags or t-shirts. There is an organization that uses face masks and makes amazing t-shirts. You can find these organizations. Choose the sustainable materials yourself. Of course, for paper, go digital. Use QR codes so people can scan them and get the information instead of putting thesis size booklets into their files. Go give paperless receipts. Use recycled paper wherever possible, and email reports to people. So just this is my last slide. Little things that you can start in your practice today is go electronic, find a recycler. There is a website called dailydump.org. They have recyclers all over the country listed in them. You can contact them, see who can pick up your waste, segregate at source, and you can save money too, because you're not going to be paying extra kilos for biomedical waste. Reduce single-use items, reuse multi-use drops, and form a working group within your organization, and of course advocate for sustainability. We only have one planet, so have those discussions.
Slides, please. Yeah. So before we go on to recycling and reusing products, I just wanted to give a small talk on, actually it's very important for us to put numbers, because unless we put numbers in metrics, we will not know the magnitude of the issue. So it's very important for us to measure our carbon footprint, and I'm not going to go into the details, because at some point in time we'll have to compensate it off. But if we start early, it can be voluntary, but later it'll have to be pushed down our throat, because it's going to be mandatory from the government's point of view, because they need to get the optics also of the country right. So if you calculate the energy consumption, this is a standard electricity bill from my clinic, and this shows the electricity consumption in milliamperes. So if I were to calculate or tabulate it, there are set mathematical metrics for this. I am generating about 76,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide with just electricity consumption, assuming 70% of my electricity comes out of a thermal power plant. That's a lot of CO2 generation. This is just to show you that the thermal power plant generates in Rajasthan about 60%, so that's the calculation that I've used. This is the consumption that I have. The second thing that gives a lot of carbon footprint to any clinic or hospital is travel. And it's not necessarily the travel of doctors to conferences, but more importantly, the staff that is coming up and down. And we calculated our staff at some point in time when we calculated, we are generating so much carbon dioxide with the staff, because we mapped their fuel efficiency to their vehicle and the distance that they're traveling. This was a little bit of an exercise. We did the same for the patients per day also. We tabulated for 25 patients and we generalized it to get a general ballpark picture of how much carbon footprint or carbon emission our patients are doing when they're coming to our clinic. More visits, as you understand, means more carbon footprint. So if you call the patients often for khujli pani and for follow-ups just to fill up your clinic, you realize that you're causing a lot of damage, very not knowing. But also one of the bigger causes, particularly in our clinic here at Raghudeep, was suppliers. Because a lot of these IOLs come to and fro. We order small batches of materials that come, small 10 BSS at a time, 20 cassettes at a time. So if you order small batches, a lot of transportation also adds to the carbon dioxide load. So this is how it tabulated out. Staff is 516, patients is 1152, and supplies is 1200. That's the amount of CO2 we are generating per year, averaging it out for OPD that runs about 60-70 patients a day with a staff strength of 35. If you calculate the carbon footprint of waste generation and water consumption, water has a carbon footprint because there's a big cycle, water cycle that comes to your clinic. You have to pump this water, desalinate it, clean it, you have to distribute it to the clinic and in the clinic, consume it, and then you have to transfer sewage. And if you have a sewage treatment plant, that also consumes energy. So water is just not, your consumption of water, it adds to your carbon footprint because there's a huge chain involved in it. Again, we tabulated the amount of water we use. So on an average, we're using about 2.5 liters of lakh liters of water per year in our clinic. Our carbon footprint of water comes out to 2,600 kilograms. And I could do this sitting off the internet, which means it's, it's not difficult to do, and I'm sure there can be better algorithms to do it. But on an average, it's a huge impact. It's more than the transport of my staff and patients put together in the year. That's the amount of CO2 generation I'm doing out of water. So if I look at the total carbon footprint, an average size clinic of my hospital or my clinic is generating close to just short of 100,000 kilograms of CO2 in a year. And that's the magnitude of the problem that we are facing. So if we extrapolate it to the entire ophthalmology and look at all the hospitals, small and big, the number is going to be massive. So I'm going to discuss my strategy after the last two talks in the interest of time on what we are doing at Raghudeep and the small moves that we've started. But before that, I would like to finish off the reusables and the water and electricity conservation. So, and then we can, if at all, we can discuss what we can do jointly as small steps and maybe add on for our next year's conferences or in our small forums to see what we can do to build change. So Dr. Haripriya, please, we will love to hear your talk now.
Can we have the slides on, please? Thank you, Samaresh, for bringing this important topic to focus. So I think we all now understand that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. This has been published in Lancet, and what that leads us to is that it now becomes the greatest global health opportunity, something which we can work on and should work on. I think the time is now. And that's why I think this whole course and this discussion is very important. So there are guidelines for climate-friendly hospitals from the WHO, and this includes being energy efficient, having a green building design, have alternate energy generation using clean, renewable energy, consider transportation, which can be either reducing the fuels or use alternate fuels, consider using more locally grown sustainable foods, reuse, reduce, recycle, compost waste, and conserve water. So I think all of these factors are important, and through the course of the next few slides, I'll be sharing some of the initiatives which we are taking to try to address some of these aspects. So in terms of infrastructure, energy, it's important if we can have, at least the newer hospitals, focus more on more natural ventilation and better lighting. This can reduce the need for electricity, and also have a layout where you can minimize movement. That will be very critical as well. Also, while building a building, I think we now try to focus on using materials which will reduce the maintenance. So you need less water, less frequent effort to try to maintain them. We also have all the housing, at least about 70% of our staff stay on campus. So all our campuses, we have housing on campus, and those who are willing to stay. This also reduces commute and reduces use of fuel. The other aspect is energy. The 75% of energy which we use now at Aravind is clean energy, and this comes from both using of the solar capacities in-house and by procuring clean energy from the private sources. So this is another area which we are trying to look at critically. In terms of water management, the newer hospitals, the last 3 or 4 hospitals, we have a water treatment plant called DWATS, which is actually a very evolved, very good system where we reuse about 90% of the water, and this water is used in the gardens and in the toilet flushes. We also do rainwater harvesting, which I think most of us would advocate for both at our homes and at places of work. So we do realize that the way to go is to reduce, reuse, and recycle. So in eye care setup, how can we focus on this? So by reducing, we want to reduce the number of visits the patient would have to come to the hospital. So we try to focus on finishing as many investigations or touch points on the same day as possible. So if a patient has to see a specialist on the same day, we try and ensure we reduce the number of revisits if it is not required. We also use EMR across our system, and that helps to reduce paper waste. And we have a rationalized use of consumables, and SOPs also help us ensure reducing stocking unnecessary materials, and this can also reduce the need for waste. So reuse is important, multi-use wherever it is possible. So I think there's a lot of focus here. Most recently, I think we had a publication from the American Academy that we can reuse the eye drops for multiple patients. I think we just saw from the earlier speakers, which we've always been doing in India. So I think it is a good idea that you can reuse the same bottle for the next patient, as long as you don't touch the dropper tip on the patient's lid or lashes. So, but having very clear protocols for reuse is also very important, and recycling and repurpose is important. So use or dispose of these items is also very critical. In terms of hospital process, like I mentioned, we would try to finish as many investigation diagnoses on the same visit, and having a lean clinical protocol backed with evidence-based medicine is very useful, and having SOPs. The follow-ups, if possible, we'll ask them to go back to our vision centers or community clinics, so they don't have to come back to the base hospital, so they reduce the amount of travel time. So the 1 day or 3 week follow-up, they would go to the clinic which is most close to them. Operating room protocols at Aravind, we have been using the twin table system. So each OR, each surgeon has 2 tables which they work on, and the 2 paramedical staff who assist them. And the surgeon also uses the same gown. So we don't scrub between cases, we use the same gown, which is typically linen, which is cloth. And we also clean the operating room floor about once every hour, not after every case. So we had a chance to change some of these protocols during the COVID time, and so we tried to compare and see how does our original protocol compare with trying to have 1 patient in the OR at a time and cleaning after each case does. So we published this paper in BJO last year. We looked at about 85,000 surgeries, about 56,000 surgeries we had done before COVID, and about 29,000 after COVID, during the COVID protocol time. So before that, we had the patients were not gowned, surgical gloves were disinfected but not changed between cases, and the OR floors were not cleaned between every case. And multiple patients underwent preparation and surgery in the OR at the same time. Now, during the COVID pandemic, we had each patient was gowned, surgical gloves were changed for each case, the OR floors were clean, counters were cleaned, and only 1 patient in the OR at a time. So we compared these 2 protocols to look at our endophthalmitis rate, and we found that endophthalmitis rate was similar. So we continue to do our old practices of having 2 patients in the room at the same time and cleaning the ORs about once every hour. But we do change gloves now after the COVID pandemic. Some of the surgical protocols we work towards is to have very stringent sterile protocols and sharing of supplies, and minimize use of single-use instruments wherever it is possible. So looking at the different items we use, like I think again we heard from the previous speakers, it's a good thing to kind of segregate at waste and separate the paper and the plastic. This way you can actually recycle these items. So as you can see here, the plastic drapes and packaging material are disposed and they're recycled and sold, and the medicine and consumable containers are also recycled. The cotton swabs and sharps, etc., obviously go into the yellow bin, biomedical waste, disposed. Surgical gloves and syringes are changed for each case, and that is also disposed in the biomedical waste. Surgical instruments, we do use a flash autoclave between cases, and this again is now approved. So each table would have between 10 to 12 sets, and then once you have the sets come in from after the 10 sets are done, we would then have them go through a flash autoclave cycle. The trays and pans get autoclaved end of the day, and the surgery dress and gown, like I said, we use linen. This also helps to reduce waste, and this gets disposed end of the day. So the surgeon wears the same gown and for the entire session. So there is a lot of discussion about use of single-use devices. Can we use them? more than one page. Some of the commonly used single-use devices would be the custom packs, the phaco tips and sleeves, the anti-vitrectomy probe, Simcoe cannula, iris hooks. So we do reuse some of these single-use items. Now, what are the concerns one might have when reusing single-use items? One, that we may compromise on the intended function. Like if you're using a phaco tip, if it's used again, will it function the same way? Second, it may not be designed to allow thorough decontamination. Especially if you have instruments with lumen, you have to be more careful to try and clean them, and the potential cross-infection and endotoxins which may be there and cause any TAS. So when we do try to use, like the anti-vitrectomy probe, our recommended use is up to 5 times, but we have a very clear, stringent protocol as to what one would have to do right after the surgery and at the end of the day, and how you will have to package these items and how many times. So if it is functioning fine, the cutting is good, aspiration is good, up to 5 times, but if it does not function well, or if it functions but it's beyond 5, it has to be condemned. So again, having a good system of labeling to know the number of times it's reused is also very important. So we use the seal which has the date and talks about number of times. So this pouch, so we kind of, after it's been used, the unsterile probe goes back into this pouch until it is reprocessed and re-sterilized and ready for use on the following day or another day. The other aspect I was talking about, are we compromising on the function? Some of these single-use devices, while labeled as single-use devices, so this is one study which was published in 2018, where they compared phaco tips, which were labeled as they could be reused, and some companies labeled their tips as single-use. And they compared both these tips, and they said that actually there was no significant difference in the phaco tip, which were labeled for single use or multiple uses. So I think, it is end of the day, if you are going to reuse some of them, you can test and see how the function is, but more importantly, also ensure that your reprocessing is done in the right way. So the carbon footprint which we generate, now because of this policy of reusing and recycling, in Aravind is much lesser than what it is in the Western world. So it's about 1/28 as was shared earlier, which is in Aravind, probably one cataract surgery generates the carbon emission equivalent to driving for about 25 kilometers. It equates to about driving for 500 kilometers in the UK. That's the amount of waste they generate with each cataract surgery, which is quite a lot of waste. We have a big responsibility. So Cassandra Thiel and the team at Aravind Hospital, Pondicherry, actually did a very nice study, and they found that the waste which we have in Aravind is about 20 times lesser than what it is in the US or the UK. Now, does this compromise care and outcome? See, the endophthalmitis rate, which we published about 2 years back in a consecutive series of about 2 million cases, showed that the endophthalmitis rate was about 0.02, which is similar or even lower than many other published papers from the US and UK. And this is just to show how much of waste we generate. This is one phaco case in the US versus 100 phaco cases in India. So we actually are leading the way in India, and it's very important for us to stick with what we believe and not to mimic the West in this area. As long as we are confident about our protocols and our outcome, I think we should stick to them. And this very recent editorial by David Chang, and I think this is a very well written editorial, and he says that the overwhelming majority of surgeons and nurses want more reusable options today. And there's more discretion on when to reuse products labeled for single use and greater manufacturer consideration of carbon footprint. So I think this is the way which the world is going, and I think we are on top of the game and we should continue to be. Again, this is a very interesting survey from ESCRS members, where they said that many of these members would like to consider short cycles. So either the 26% is doing it, and 65% would actually be willing to consider, if the regulations permit, short cycle. Reprocessing and single-use instruments, again 7% are doing it, and 84% would like to reuse it if their manufacturer would say so. Again, OR staff using the surgical mask same day, most of them are still using. So I think most of the surgeons and the medical teams are willing to reuse and reduce the amount of supplies which are using. So this is the overall feel. The final take on this is leadership is key, and ophthalmology having the highest procedural volumes, I think it is our responsibility to take it as a compelling opportunity and obligation to lead efforts within medicine to make our essential services more sustainable. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Soumya. She's running a beautiful practice in Coorg, and she will be talking about water and electricity management.
Thank you, Dr. Samaresh, for putting together this wonderful session. And I'm so inspired by my previous speakers as well. But like ma'am said, we're already leading the way because we've always believed in reusing things. And I think sometime back we would see memes on internet about jugaad in Indian households where we're reusing everything, but actually we've always been so sensitive about wasting things. I think it's part of our culture to make the best of everything that we have, and I think we shouldn't lose it just wanting to mimic the West. I think that's something very important for us to take back from here. So water and electricity management are one of the key pillars of sustainability. Like Dr. Samaresh was discussing, electricity is one of the key indicators in management of sustainability. And conserving water is not only important for its environmental impact and in being a very important and precious resource, but also it can help communities deal with climate change, and it can go a long way in conserving our aquatic life as well. Water scarcity is not something that we are potentially anticipating a problem in the future, but it is a reality in most cities right now. And buildings account for a significant portion of water consumption, making sustainable water management extremely important. So to understand how efficiently we are using water, it's important for us to understand the concept of water performance score. So water performance score of a building is the annual freshwater demand in liters divided by building occupancy and the number of working days. So to understand how efficient a building is or the people in the building are, it is compared with a sustainable and LEED certified building to see how well they are doing in comparison with other buildings. There are many ways to conserve water, and it is very important for us to follow each one of these techniques, whether it is installing water efficient appliances, making sure we regularly check and detect leaks, harvesting rainwater, recycling grey water, or using xeriscaping, which is basically to use drought resistant plants to reduce water usage. In the last decade, there have been many innovations as far as water efficient fixtures are concerned, starting from low flow faucets to energy rated washing machines and using sensor activated faucets to reduce water usage. So this is a small contraption I picked up from Amazon more than 7 to 8 years back, and like you can see, you can just fix it onto the end of a tap, and it on its own just converts a high flow tap into a low flow tap. And I'm sure sensors for water tanks are already there in our day-to-day life. Now we are all sensitive to water leakage this way. And along with this, taking care of other areas of plumbing deficiency can go a long way in conserving water. Both Feng Shui and Vastu describe a leaky tap as extremely inauspicious. So it shows that we've always been sensitive about not wasting water, and I think we should take this forward seriously as well. Rainwater harvesting is basically collecting water from surfaces like rooftops, filtering it, and then storing it in tanks or cisterns for non-potable reasons. Similarly, grey water recycling is the practice of using wastewater from laundry, dishwashing, and bathing to again further filter it, store it, and then use it for activities like flushing, irrigation, car washing, etc. Now, the benefits of rainwater harvesting and grey water recycling is that you get to reduce the demand of fresh water that needs to be used for potable reasons. So basically what we want to do in grey water management is to reduce the need for fresh water, which we can restrict for potable use, and then reuse grey water and recharge our groundwater so that we are more sustainable and we are not in crisis when the time comes. Wastewater treatment from sewage is going to be mandatory for many large buildings. The government regulations want to make sure that we are not releasing sewage water into water bodies and then we are recycling that as well. STPs earlier would be constructed in the form of chambers, but now they are prefabricated and they can be underground as well. And as our practice scales, we will find that this is going to become mandatory for our ophthal hospitals as well. Xeriscaping, like I discussed, is to use drought-resistant plants versus fancier plants like lawns, which require a lot of watering. And efficient irrigation methods like drip irrigation and subsurface irrigation can prevent wasting of water through unnecessary usage. Now, energy or electricity is the most heavily weighted category as far as sustainability is concerned due to its effect on global warming. The importance of efficient electricity management is not only in sustainability, but it can go a long way in reducing the dent that electrical bills are causing to us. The highest use of electricity in modern buildings tends to be heating and air conditioning, followed by lighting. Equipment and plug loads come next, and since as ophthalmologists we are so dependent on equipment, it's very important for us to be sensitive to this and try and reduce plug loads in the form of machines sitting idle when they're not actively being used. So that is something I think we need to introduce in our culture with our staff, where we're not running anything or just keeping something on just to prevent having to turn it on. So the energy performance of a building or an equipment, the lower it is, the lower the energy use, the higher the energy performance score. The key components of electricity management involves identifying the usage, analyzing it, and automating it to prevent energy drains. So this is a sub-meter that we can introduce in our circuits, whether it's per floor or per segment or per equipment, whatever it is that we want to calculate. In turn, it goes into a PLC or programmable logic circuit and then further analyzed by a SCADA or supervisory control and data acquisition system. So most large industries already have this in place, and they use it to as a way to identify breakdown and energy leaks. So like we discussed, the most important or the highest electricity consumption in our buildings is through air conditioning. So it's important for us to see how we can reduce our usage as far as air conditioning is involved. So instead of using multiple split ACs, we can use VRV units, which sort of reduce the electricity load in areas where it is not needed. And basically only required capacity is generated depending on where it is being used. It also comes with a central remote controller, so you can identify areas where it is being used idle and then attend to it as and when required. The next most important thing is the lighting. So this can be done either by implementing LED lighting and using occupancy sensors or using natural light. I'm sure all of us have moved from our older incandescent and halogen lights to LED lights now. And it's very important for us to understand building architecture when we start to build, and whenever we are able to make changes, to make the best use of natural light and ventilation. So this is my first floor waiting area. And I can run my clinic from 9 to 6 without having to turn on a single light. And of course we use, this is my consultation chamber again, without a single light bulb being turned on. But of course for aesthetic reasons in opticals and things like that, we may need to turn it on. But just making a point here for using natural sunlight for as much as possible. And if you've understood in our ancient literature as well, in Vastu, they want us to have a lot of openings in the east and north. So this is where the best amount of comfortable light can come in. And it is advised to build completely on the west so that we block out the sunlight, and the heat that is coming into the buildings can be blocked out. And just to give you a perspective, in my hospital I don't have a single AC in most of my consultation rooms or common waiting areas, and except for the equipment which need it. And I use the fan for about 2 months a year. But of course I live in Coorg, so we can't extrapolate the same thing to Jaipur or Chennai. But I think we need to be sensitive about how we can make best use of what is naturally available to us. The last thing, of course, would be energy efficient appliances to replace equipment that are high on energy with equipment that are available with lower energy use. I remember as a child being annoyed that, you know, in holidays when you're at home and 10 o'clock you want to watch TV, the government suddenly turns off the light, and I'm like, why is the light being turned off? Why is the electricity going away when we need it the most? It's because there are certain hours of the day when the demand for electricity is the highest. in industries and in commercial establishment, and the government is not able to meet this need for energy in the peak hours. This is why we have load shedding. There are also states wherein the electricity charges for use during peak hours are much higher than the rest of the day. So it would be very important and very intelligent of us to use renewable energy sources, especially to cover these times, so that we can reduce the load on the entire system as well. So solar systems are available along with inverters now, where you can generate solar energy, store it in batteries, and use it even just in the peak hours, so you reduce the demand on the entire system. The government is incentivizing solar energy in a big way as well. So if this is something that you have been considering to do, I think this is the best time to do it. So in conclusion, energy management, sustainability, water conservation was a problem of the past, and if we have not dealt with it, then it's a problem currently. It's important not only because we want to conserve these resources for our future generations, but also it can make us more sustainable to deal with climate change, weather change, unpredictability, to be sort of sustainable in our own sense and not be dependent on external sources as well. Thank you. This is where I work. Thanks.
All right. So just the last few slides before we end for the day. I just wanted to share with you. We started with this whole sustainability ideology just about a few years back, and we were not very sure and not even knowledgeable about how to do things. But we decided for one thing at our clinic that we want to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we generate, and maybe we want to contribute, but that's a later stage because that's way ahead in evolution. Solar energy, I think Dr. Soumya has discussed, and I think Dr. Haripriya also showed that they're doing a lot of solar energy generation. But this is how I calculated my solar energy generation. So if I have to put a solar plant, 50 kilowatt capacity, I'd be saving a lot of money basically at the end of the day, because you have to incentivize it for the person or the hospital that does it. There are websites available that will calculate your load and tell you how much you can do and how much area you do need. When it comes to paper, we are 100% EMR, and I guess a lot of us are now moving towards EMR. It's logistically easy because you don't have to have manpower to fetch it, thereby reducing your manpower load. And also it's very paper safe because you don't have to use a lot of paper, and it makes your place also safe for fire and other hazards. So we use emails and WhatsApp to send the data to our patients. Most of them are happy with that because it stays with them and paper does get lost. But for whatever paper do we generate, we now buy paper which is recycled paper from certified companies. The paper costs the same. There is no difference in the price. It's only the paper looks a little yellow. It doesn't look white. So it's just a mental barrier of getting away from that ivory looking sheet to a more yellow looking sheet. But this paper is, for whatever it is worth, it's a lot of pre-recycled paper. So it is reducing our burden on the carbon dioxide footprint. And the same goes with the cups also. There are a couple of these companies that are giving it. If you buy in bulk, they'll give you a very good deal at this also. This is what I'm using in the clinic. We are rainwater harvesting, but we are not storing the water. We are letting it run into the groundwater table. We also incentivize use of personalized bottles. So we give these bottles to the staff so that they don't have to use these paper cups, because a lot of the cups used are actually the staff and not the patients. So we give them bottles which are custom to their name so that they can just fill up and keep it for the rest of the day rather than using the paper. We've encouraged the use of walking for those who can, or cycling to work, and I've been, for the last 6 months, I've been pushing my staff to pick up EVs, and we do give them some incentive for EV buying. We tell them that we'll help them pay 10% of it from the hospital side if they do invest in a newer sort of conveyance. But what actually worked for us is to do these step challenges where we get the whole hospital to work cohesively, and we do this sort of an activity every month where we push our staff to not use lifts because we work over 4 floors. And we encourage them to use steps or walking in the course of the day. And this is just to show you 2 months where, it started over here with this month, and eventually the whole thing became a challenge. And even in the free time or lunch hours, you would see the staff pacing up and down just to get the footsteps going, and they just completely stopped using the lifts in the clinic. So not only did it help us reduce electricity, which I think in the long term we'll get to know, but it also binds us and gets the staff very sensitized to environment sustainability and the idea of conserving and that they can contribute to it. And obviously I give them gifts, but these are mostly the MR gifts that I get, so I give them back as first, second and third. So it's a big challenge, and there's a great pride in the hospital in trying to do the maximum number of steps. There is a little bit of fudge that I do understand, that they go home and give these watches that I've given them to their children and make them run around. So, but I mean, it's helping someone somewhere, so why not? We've also applied for green building certification. There are a few companies that do it. I'm doing it with Association of Chamber of Commerce, or ASSOCHAM for now. They do it for residential, health, hotel, many other things. We are halfway through this process. They have a whole list of things. It includes daylight, air quality, amount of foliage that you have, fire and safety and whatnot, and certifies you based on the amount of parameters that you qualify. These are a lot. There's an extensive list. This is just to show you that for new buildings, this is their guidelines, and this is like NABH, but for green building certification. And I mean, this just, they asked us for many maps, so we had to sit with the architects, get our whole planning done, get a lot of right amount of oxygen generating plants, and like putting more local plants rather than water consuming plants in the clinic. So it's very important for us to incentivize this. I'm doing it at a small scale by giving subsidies to people. And again, if they come up with good implementable ideas, when we do our staff meetings on Saturdays, we will give them a half-day bonus if the idea is worth implementing. So I talked to Alcon also, which was again one of the companies that I use products for, and everybody's looking at it, not only us, but all the companies. But imagine a company that big has done just this much as to remove plastic from their IOL boxes and finish it up with tape, and this is their sustainability motto for the year. So we can do much better, and I think with this today's session that we are ending now, because we have some people that have stuck with us for a while and we still have 5 minutes, I would really love if I can just pass on the mic and everybody can just add on one point that we should try to do this year, so that we can all gather again next year, and maybe we'll have some of you on the podium again to discuss better strategies. I'll just push the mic to you. Just hold on.
Thank you. That was a lovely talk. Definitely it's very inspiring, especially for small centers. Yeah, especially for small centers. All of your talks were really inspiring because all of us can obviously do our bit. But even really small centers, if you have a rooftop, you can definitely shift to a solar system. Something which is very implementable now.
Minimum that we can do is like the water tap. You just plug in that. That will also save things. We are anyway in India. We are used to reuse that cycle. I have never believed. So whenever I have gone to the West to observe, and there were a lot of, they wash their hands, use tissue, throw it, again wash their hands, use tissue, throw it. We never do that. So things like that are already ingrained in us. But as Haripriya said, that we need to have data to support it, so that no one can accuse us of cutting corners and this. But otherwise, I think it's ingrained in us, and all we need is our proper protocols. If like some big can give us these, not be hauled up. That, for example, a simple thing like changing gowns and wasting that much water to wash gowns between cases. And I think we have been doing it ever since, but now that it is validated, I mean, it adds weight to us. Absolutely. To what we were doing. Thanks.
Hello. Of a lecture, and I think these kind of lectures should be more easily available, and having only one lecture in whole almost 100 or 200 lectures doesn't justify it, so that if it is brought about AIOS in a bigger platform, and as he said that we get a guidelines, it will be more easily acceptable.
Wonderful session, really eye-opening, and I think it's important that everybody recognizes areas of change in their own practice. For example, woven plastic is so ubiquitous, especially the disposable caps and masks. We've stopped using disposable caps and masks. We only use cloth, linen caps and masks in the hospital. So these are simple things. Even if we had a practice of giving bags to our patient when they register, so they can keep all their folders and files, but those bags were of woven plastic. So we have to recognize those points which we are just not aware about and try to remedy those.
No, wonderful session. I think very nicely dissected not only the problem but how to deal with it, and I don't know whether Soumya, you influenced the IOC to have your session here because it's all natural light. There are no lights here.
Dr. Vandana.
My compliments for this session. This is the first time I've attended a session like this. It's been an eye-opener. Now we at Raghudeep Eye Hospital in Ahmedabad, we have made a small change. We have switched to AMR, as Samaresh said. We have done away with tissues in the bathrooms. We use only the hand dryers. And the only thing that everywhere, all over India, these plastic, somebody just brought a whole box of plastic bottles that's just now right in front of us. These are the ones that are the biggest challenge, and I'm glad the kit has a water bottle which is to be refilled. So that's another thing at our clinic in Ahmedabad that we need to change is don't give the patients plastic bottles. Thank you for this session. Thank you.
It was a wonderful talk. We are following we have a private clinic in Mangalore, and we are following most of this using recyclables, reusables and all that. But I have a suggestion. If all the doctors of AIOS, All India Ophthalmic Society, decide, then they can influence the pharma companies not to give away all the compliments, because we refuse most of the compliments given to us, but the medical reps say they have strict instructions to deliver it, and so even if we refuse it, it doesn't have any effect, because once they produce it, they have to give it. So you can influence, the AIOS can put pressure on the pharma companies. And one more thing I want to ask is there EPR and extended producer responsibility for pharma companies?
So that's, I think, I mean, for whatever limited knowledge I have right now, pharma, particularly Indian pharma, is not very heavily looking into it from their production towards the hospital. They may have some sustainable policies, and I think Dr. Haripriya may want to shed more light on this, but it's the surgicals as of now that are looking more at it, and more multinationals, because of the pressure, the sheer pressure that they're feeling globally. There are changes being brought about, but again, the change is small for now, and it's being shown as it's a big change, but I don't know about any Indian pharma company that has taken a big step towards sustainability.
So the pharma companies, they don't have this producer responsibility of reusing or recycling the plastic which they produce? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Thank you.
In the US, Alcon and Bausch & Lomb have started a recycling program. I believe Bausch & Lomb is doing it for contact lenses, and Alcon has started it for some kind of one of the levels of packaging of IOLs. But no, in India, there's no such responsibility. And the thing is, the sad part, or the slightly joke of a part, is that the Indian government was supposed to create a task force and give instruction to pharma, and the guidelines, I didn't have time to show them, but there were specifically 3 are again the same thing. Discontinue use of single plastic like straws, spoons, forks, which we have all, and those thin plastic bags, which we have all already heard of since the past 4 years. And again, it's the same thing. Your product should be water protective, heat protective, tamper proof for children, easy for senior citizens. But there is no guideline in that task force summary yet that I have seen that says that you should create a take back program of drops. Because if you look at your bin in your clinic, you will see how many eye drops bottles are there, and none of them are biohazardous unless you've touched the patient with, say, a corneal ulcer or something, and they are just going into trash. And if you look at your biomedical guidelines in India, technically the drop should go into the yellow bag. So even the biomedical guidelines are telling you to give us the drops, but technically they are not biomedical waste. So why are we giving those drops to BMW, and why are we not sending them into recycling? So this is one of the things that we started doing last year, when I found the organization that said, give us all your medicine packaging, because they are turning it into polyfuel for industry, so which was the tertiary step of recycling. So that's the thing that we need to now create at source, because earlier all our eye drops were going into yellow. Yellow was always our heaviest bags, and then we realized that if we are using the same drop for 10 people, then why is it biohazard? And the other thing is our patients are also using those at home, right? Every patient is using lubricant, so they are at home also creating that eye drop waste. So how do we create a program where they also submit it to the recycler? So now I make my patients also sign up. The organization only takes 150 rupees one time charge, and they come to your doorstep and collect it. So there's no reason to not kind of sign up with all these organizations.
So there is a website called isustain.org. I think I missed showing it. It's run by ASCRS, and it is an excellent resource. So if you have any information you want on how to calculate your carbon emission or what actions you can take, small practices, large practices, so please log on to the website isustain.org. In fact, they also have a session at this conference. I'm not sure of the date and time, but I remember that they have a course at this conference as well. So those who are interested should step in.
So I'd like to thank everybody for sticking around and contributing to the instruction course. And I'll invite the faculty for a photograph on the stage.